Welcome to Citizens Forum. This is December 1st, 2015. The first part of Citizens Forum is always the Walter and Jack show, so we'll get right into it. So Walter, the climate change meeting started in Paris yesterday. And today I read that automobile sales in Canada are at a record high. So while Rachel Notley and Christy Clark and Justin Trudeau are all telling us what a great job we're doing, in fact, car sales are at a record high. So something is very, very wrong. The car, I think, is the _1 enemy in this. And I think what's been done over the past 50 years, really, is the automobile and the oil industries, the automobile industry and the oil industry together have created this insane scenario where we need cars. In all of human history, we have not had cars, but now we can't live without them. And they've actually created societies in which we all completely depend upon the car. They've deliberately done that, even though they knew, the news I think was just in the last couple of weeks, that they knew about climate change a long, long, long time ago and kept it secret, and not only kept it secret, but got their media to mislead us and lie to us, and of course funded organizations and funded a whole movement of people who, who go out there for pay and argue that there is no such thing as climate change. So, and the danger, I think, is immense, and the reaction doesn't seem to be enough to deal with it.
No, there's trends always that happen. Like, you could have some good things happening as well as some bad things happening. And, I think the bad thing about the automobile sales is if you looked at what type of automobiles are being sold, then it's even more devastating. You can see so many light trucks and SUVs and large metal objects going onto the road. That's a very bad trend too. If they were selling any, high efficiency automobiles, electric automobiles, then you would, you'd feel a little better about the whole situation. So yeah, there's a problem there for sure. I think Trudeau and everybody's getting a pretty free ride in Paris this time because they're stuck with the old goals that the Conservatives had, which were a joke. But I think they're there and trying to show that they're willing to do something. Let's just find out if they're ever going to pull anything off.
Yeah. And we all have to be very careful. The way the media is going to present this may not necessarily be the way it actually is. So we all have to keep our eye open on that. And just another thing, here in Victoria, we're about to spend maybe $100 million on a Mackenzie overpass. Like, does this mean that our leadership feels that the day of the car is still not dead, but there's going to be more and more cars on the road? Is that what they're prime? And over in Vancouver, Christy Clark is spending billions on new bridges because the old ones or the tunnels are full. Well, aren't we going in the other direction? If we're going to avoid the disaster of climate change, we've got to have less cars. And what we can do is just build a great, wonderful public transit system. Now, the public transit system, I think, is being deliberately kind of like, who wants to ride it, right?
Yeah.
But it could be great, and it should be great.
I just drove in my van, and heavy traffic, dark, the weather's not too good. It's not safe to walk on the streets, Jack. People get into cars just so they don't get run over by cars. And there's two things happening too that as we transition into more public transportation, there's a little bit of pain, a little bit cramp our lifestyle a little bit. On the other hand, when nothing's being done to make public transportation any better, I wonder, for instance, this Mackenzie overpass, are they building that in such a way that it could accommodate light rail transit in and around it in the future?
Yes, at some point in the future.
Or
it's always in the future.
Are they going to just build your traditional sort of cloverleaf or something there for keep the cars whipping around nice and fast?
No, I think there is something in the overpass or whatever they're going to build for future light rail. But for that $90 million, we could actually build an entire light rail system from the western communities right to downtown Victoria. It means we'd have to put in a new rail bridge because they destroyed the blue rail bridge, quite deliberately took that out so that there could be no rail link. I mean, this is the way things operate. The entire society has become so corrupted in some ways.
And that's a good corridor because the ENN rail line ran through a lot of neighborhoods all the way on out there. So it was within walking distance of a lot of houses. You start putting it down the highway, it's a bit of a hike to get out to the highway for a lot of neighborhoods. It's a little bit on the periphery of the town. It's not far from ideal.
So climate change, I mean, the impact is going to be so devastating. And in some ways, for some people, it already is. I mean, here in Victoria, we don't notice it. I've asked people from around the world, is climate change happening in your country? They all say yes, it's happening everywhere. But I mean, we've got to act, and it's just that our leadership will not let us. They keep pushing this massive, insane oil and automobile culture. And if we can't get around them, they will happily destroy us all as long as the profits keep rolling in.
I don't know how that's going to change. We are in a crisis, and you witnessed what happened in France in the last few weeks with these attacks and everything, which I think are associated with the petroleum industry. These wars in East Mediterranean region are in oil-producing areas, and oil is a big part of the politics. And I think there's a concern that I have is that if, for instance, these attacks in Paris had a component of inside help, if the intelligence networks were aiding and abetting the crime, and if you'd have to wonder, well, what is it their main objective is? And I think one is to change the narrative and the discussion away from climate change, away from positive, good things of developing clean energy and diversified energy sources, decentralized energy sources, which is the opposite to centralized control, petroleum-based economies where, you're hooked on one type of a source of energy. And I think these two forces are really at war now. And I think that's the major fight that's going on. And I think the petroleum people will very gladly let a lot of people die in the process, in the battle. That's too bad. But we can get control. We have a good government in Canada, I think, federally, and I think there's a chance we can go quite a ways. And I think we should just proceed and just do our best.
I really hope you're right about our own federal government. I think that Europe is under attack. I think that on a lot of issues, Europe really leads the way. They've got excellent public transit. They have a progressive tax structure. They're the ones with the good healthcare systems now. They've built kind of more, they're moving away. They won't allow the GMOs in Europe in a lot of places. They won't sign the free trade agreements that give the corporations power over their governments. And so now what's happened, I think, is that Europe is under attack. The corporations do not like what Europe is doing. And I'm not saying I'm right, but I'm just saying we have to factor this into the equation, that Greece was destroyed financially. Italy and Spain are not that far behind. And now Europe is being destabilized by an influx of refugees from wars that were quite deliberately caused. And those refugees have been in Turkey for quite a while, and now suddenly Turkey opened the border and let them into Europe. And this is followed by, the attack in Paris. The right-wing corporate parties are gaining power. This, I'm sure, is deliberate. And, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that the people who run the world do. They've done it before. Just Google Operation Gladio, and you will see how the CIA, in I think it was 1980, ran an operation that set off a bomb in the busiest train station in Italy in order to weaken the political left in Italy. 80 people killed, 200 wounded. Kept secret, really. Nobody knows about Operation Gladio. I just heard about it from Mehdi Najari, a couple of years ago, or I wouldn't know either. So it's all possible, and what we need is to find out the truth.
Right, and if it's okay to question these things. I always tell people that people are fearful that if you question the official line, and so many times the official line has been a lie, and we all know that. Even people that even think in mainstream society do ask a lot of questions as to how this all works. Say, for instance, why did Turkey shoot down the Russian jet a couple of weeks ago? And you say, well, they were incurring on their airspace. Russia and Turkey are allies in the fight against ISIS. Why would they shoot them down anyway? These are fundamental, simple, common sense questions that people should be asking. And, obviously something else is going on. And I think what was going on is Russia was just being a little too effective at attacking ISIS. And a lot of these fighters were moving across the Turkish border away from the action, and Russia was getting in pretty close. And I think if Russia destroys ISIS, the whole game is up there, right? This is a total fake war. So I don't think they like that. So they were letting Putin know that it's going to cost them a lot of money because these jets are so expensive. And I think Russia would, do not want to lose a bunch of jets because it's going to be a burden for them.
Somebody also blew up a Russian passenger plane, killing 225 people, I think.
Yeah.
So, I mean, really, just to Gwynne Dyer, a very well-known columnist, wrote a column years ago, I read it, about World War I. And what he said about World War I was, things were so bad in the world in the years leading up to 1914 that there was a movement in the world towards socialism and democracy. And people really wanted a change from these powerful corporate interests that ruled the world. And what Gwynne Dyer said is that they started World War I to wipe out that generation that wanted change. And that's basically what they did. Mm-hmm. So if things like that are possible, and if that's the way our rulers operate, then we had better open our eyes very quickly, and because, obviously they don't care about us. We've got to take control of our own country. I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, and I think the start is to speak up, to ask questions, don't be fearful. Fear is a tactic to make us fearful, to shut us up. And no, now's not the time to be that way. We have to come right out and keep asking the questions. These attacks in France really have to be examined much more carefully by an independent investigation team. The French Secret Service are suspects at this point, so I don't think they should be allowed to run an investigation. And we deserve answers. The world deserves answers as to what really happened there. With that type of scrutiny, it's harder and harder for them to operate. It's just harder and harder for them to pull off these sort of acts of violence when they're placed under a lot of scrutiny and suspicion.
We'll see if something like that can happen, and if our own media will start to just ask the questions. I'm certainly not saying that I'm right, and Walter's not saying that he's right, but you have to ask the questions if you know the history. There was a headline in the Times Colonist several days ago. You can maybe read the...
Oh yeah, it's neighbors fed up with tent city.
Yeah. So a tent city is now set up on the courthouse just off of downtown on Quadra. And it's interesting that this is happening because obviously the provincial government is making this happen by allowing it to happen, and so, but that's fine. I mean, I don't know why the provincial government is doing it. I know that we used to have, just in a park very close to where I live, there were always tents every night. Now they're gone. So I'm assuming they've moved into the tent place because it's better for them. They don't have to take their tent down every day. And I noticed in the TC story, it's neighbors, I think they had neighbors fed up with Tent City.
Yeah.
And that's the way the media always presents it. It's the homeless against the rest of us, right? They're causing trouble, they're panhandling, they're in the parks, they are doing this and they are doing that. But really, it's got nothing to do with the homeless people. They are the ones, this has been done to them. The people who run our country have deliberately created this homelessness. They want these people out on the streets for a variety of reasons. And the media will never present it in that way. Instead, they present it as the homeless against the rest of us, or, you know, blah, blah, blah. That's the way they always show it. But it's not. It's all of us against the people who run this country. They're the ones who deliberately create homelessness. And how do they do it? Well, they've underbuilt homes. There aren't enough homes, because if there were enough, the places at the bottom, the prices would just go down because you have to rent, right? Or you have to sell. And the other side of that coin, of the lack of housing, is that everybody else is being forced to pay huge amounts for housing. That's why house prices are so high. They've deliberately underbuilt in order to push prices up, and they have made fortunes from this. So it's all, I think, part of a terrible game that's being played. There's no need for homelessness, and there's no need for the high house prices either. And the people who run this country, this is how they operate. And if we don't get rid of them, they're going to destroy, I mean, they're destroying everything.
Yeah, and I mean, you could go down and talk to any of those people. You know, see who's staying there and hear what their stories are. And you know, they're just average folk, just like you and I, and things didn't go well one way or another. And employment is, you know, it's so hard to find a decent job these days. And if you don't fit the mold exactly that's being shaped for you, you're out. And it's in a large view, I think you're correct that capitalism works with shortages. Capitalism works with being able to control a labor market. It's always necessary to have a certain amount of unemployment to keep wages down for the rest. I mean, there's a lot of good, solid evidence to show that, you know, it is somewhat deliberate.
And so in the last couple of weeks, the media has focused massive amounts of attention on the refugee issue of 25,000 Syrian refugees coming to Canada. Now, it's an issue that they created because in the middle of the election, they showed all these pictures of a dead child in Syria, and the media pretended they cared. And they made it an election issue, and the government promised to bring in 25,000 refugees, which is great. Now the media is using it to divide the country and to give massive coverage to this issue, which is an important issue in many ways. But there's not one word you'll notice about the TPP, right? And the TPP, and there's not one word about proportional representation. Now, 25,000 refugees coming into the country is a big thing, but the TPP in terms of our future is much bigger, and proportional representation is much bigger. But they are deliberately using the issue of refugees. This is how the media operates. They focus us over there while they do what they want to do over here. The TPP is tremendously important. You know, we're just talking about homelessness and the lack of jobs. It used to be that we had something in Canada called the Auto Pact. And what that pact says, it was with the United States and all the big car makers. It just said for every car you sell in Canada, you have to make one in Canada, right? For every car you sell in Canada, you make one. So we had an auto industry. Poisonous industry in many ways, but created a lot of jobs, right? With NAFTA, that disappeared. And that's the whole TPP thing. So they behind the smokescreen of whatever. Right? The Auto Pact, if we still had that, imagine what it would mean for this country.
Yeah, and trade barriers, like people think that's a terrible idea. Really? Why is that such a terrible idea? If you're trying to build your own economy, you're trying to build your own industry, you want to create good, high-value jobs in sectors, you know, if you're competing against other countries who already have this fully developed, who developed their industry through protectionism.
Or pay 25 cents an hour.
Yeah, but you know, the United States was very protectionist and created a lot of industry at one time. There's nothing wrong. And by the way, it makes sense to produce things locally. Why are we shipping apples in from New Zealand, or why are we bringing in products from Asia when you could make these things right here much more cheaply, much less carbon footprint? There's a lot of good environmental reasons to produce things here, and socially it creates jobs. There's a whole lot of good things. That's through protectionism. Why is that all of a sudden become such a terrible idea? And as you know, as you say with these trade deals, we're now competing with somebody making 25 cents an hour in Southeast Asia. You know, what point, how low can you go on your wages? I mean, we've already pretty well experienced it now.
Yeah. Walter, thank you very much.
Always a pleasure, Jack.
Yeah, so, I mean, these are the fundamental issues that we've got to think about and move ahead on. I think, to me, again, the big issue is democracy. More democracy will mean a better country. Thanks for watching this segment of Citizens Forum.